I'm a proud Kaplan Leadership Program scholar. But for most of my life, the word scholar felt like it belonged to someone else. Like many of my KLP peers, I didn't arrive at higher education on a straight path. I arrived through detours, shaped by instability, absence, and survival. Before I ever had the chance to dream of college, I was already learning how to take care of myself. I left home at 18, not to chase ambition, but to chase stability and peace. By then, I had already lived many lives. When I was 5, my sisters and I were suddenly sent to the Dominican Republic after a threat to my father's life forced my parents to act quickly to protect us. My mother told us we were going on summer vacation, and that summer vacation stretched into a few years. We never enrolled in school, and instead I spent my days smashing bottle caps into jewelry with the other children whose families couldn't afford to send them to school. I peeled plantains over large pots beside my grandmother and wondered when I see my parents again and if they'd missed me. I didn't have the capacity to process what it meant to be without my parents, only the instinct to adapt. Forced to grow up quickly, I learned to take care of myself far too young. In many small ways, loneliness became a companion. I carried that self-reliance with me for years, through poverty, through homelessness, through the decade my father spent incarcerated, and through the quiet heartbreak of watching my mother work herself into depression trying to keep my sisters and me afloat. When I came back to the US at 8 years old, I walked into a 3rd grade classroom with the education of a kindergartner and the weight of adult experiences, hoping, maybe, that I could finally be a kid again. I raised my hand to answer a math problem, giving it my very best shot. I strung the digits together like one long word, and the class burst into laughter. My teacher scolded me and sent me to the rug to read quietly as punishment. Shame flooded my system as I picked up a book and hid behind it, dragging my finger across the page, mimicking the rhythm of reading so the teacher wouldn't see that I couldn't. That moment didn't just show me I was behind academically, it made me believe I wasn't good enough to catch up. It taught me that mistakes in the classroom came with consequences, that failure would cost me dignity, that teachers weren't there to help, but to decide who passed and who didn't. And so I learned, again, to take care of myself, to retreat, and to stay quiet. And that's when I stopped raising my hand. But while the classroom never felt like a safe place to explore, I could never hide the intellectual curiosity growing inside me. Over the years, my teachers would notice it in my writing, in the way I expressed my emotions, and how I made sense of the world. I didn't yet have the vocabulary of a scholar, but I had the perspective of someone who had already lived through too much to take anything at face value. Years of managing things on my own had given me a reflective voice, one shaped by observation, sharpened by survival, and rooted in a deep desire to understand. I found my first outlet in an after-school choir where I learned to dream again. I wanted to attend a performing arts high school, but the year that I got in, they lost funding for their arts program. That became a very familiar pattern. Every time I reached for something, a system pulled it away. We lost our apartment in Washington Heights during my junior year, another casualty of gentrification. My mother moved to North Carolina, but I stayed behind to finish school. I stayed with a friend, held on as long as I could, but the weight of being alone again caught up with me. I drifted through that year. My grades fell. I missed deadlines. And I graduated without a college application and without anyone encouraging me or telling me I still had a chance. I had watched my mother live in survival mode for most of her life, a woman who had never finished high school, not because she didn't care, but because no one gave her the support or space to finish. Systems failed her early, and she was left to carry the consequences. And there I was, her daughter, carrying the same weight. Not because I lacked ambition, but because no one ever taught me to believe college was meant for me. Because public schools in neighborhoods like mine weren't built to nurture that kind of belief. Because I, too, was taught to survive before I was ever taught to dream. So I worked for over a decade, 3 jobs at a time, sometimes more. I paid my rent, sent money home. I was grateful to survive, but I was intellectually starved. Eventually, that longing grew louder than my self-doubt, and I enrolled at Borough of Manhattan Community College, and that's where everything began to shift. My courses helped me understand that the gaps in my education, my family's housing instability, and my learned silence weren't personal failures. They were the result of systems, economic, racial, historical, designed to keep people like my mother and me stuck in cycles we did not create. Once I saw that clearly, I couldn't look away. I decided to major in ethnic and race studies and focus on how systemic barriers disproportionately affect low-income students of color. I still didn't know exactly where I was headed, I just knew I had something to say. During my third semester, I was accepted into Kaplan Leadership Program, and I had no idea just how much it would change my life. KLP met me at the exact intersection where students like me so often fell through the cracks. The space between financial need, academic promise, and emotional exhaustion, and quiet brilliance. Where other students were primed for college from middle school with tutors, counselors, networks, and a family who had already walked the path, I had a mother who gave everything she had just to keep us housed, fed, and loved. She gave all of herself, but after years of navigating systems that denied her the chance to finish high school, she didn't have anything left to guide me toward a future she was never allowed to imagine for herself. Kaplan helped me recover what those systems had taken, not just academic preparation, but confidence, language, community, mental clarity, stability, a belief that I was more than my trauma, that I had a voice shaped by hardship, yes, but also by depth, discipline, and a desire to lead. I didn't grow up with the application coaches or college list taped to the fridge. I assumed I'd transfer to whatever public college would accept me. I didn't dare expect more. So when Kaplan had me writing essays for Ivy League and top-tier schools, I laughed. I thought, surely this isn't for someone like me. My history's too messy, my path too far off track. But after months of late nights revising applications, workshops after workshops with my cohort, and hours spent building community with other scholars who carried stories like mine, I began to believe something different. Around this time last year, I was opening acceptance letters from nearly every college I applied to, including multiple Ivy League institutions. Today I've completed my first year at Brown University, and this summer I'll begin. Thank you. And this summer, I'll begin a research internship focused on inequalities of public school funding. That full circle moment is not luck. It's a result of deep investment from Kaplan and from people like you, hopefully very soon. Because when you support KEF, you're not just funding education, you're making it possible for students like me to reclaim the future we were told not to imagine. You are investing in scholars who bring grit and brilliance, grief and vision, reflection and drive, often in the same breath or the same tears. Tonight, I ask you to see us clearly, not as charity, not as statistics, but as thinkers, as future professors, writers, community leaders, and policymakers. Thank you.